Water is a basic need for all forms of life and is all around us. As a coastal community bordered by two rivers, water is a large part of Groton's identity. Clean Water Ways is a show to help promote healthy water quality. We're here at Project Oceanology today with Callie Scheetz. Callie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today.
Tell us a little bit about Project O, and Project O as we call it here in Groton, known as Project Oceanology.
Sure, absolutely. So Project Oceanology, we're a education and research nonprofit. We're located right here on the Avery Point campus, and our pride and joy are our research vessels that you can see in the background. So we try to really promote and instill an interest in marine science to students of all ages. So we work a lot with the K-12 population as well as college students, but also programs for the public as well.
It's a great resource that we have here in Groton. How did Project O get started?
Project O started back in the early 70s, and Mickey Weiss was one of the founders, and he's still involved in Project O today. And basically the school systems in the area wanted to take advantage of Long Island Sound and what a wonderful natural resource that was to be able to share with their students, but no one school had enough funding to purchase a boat. So they sort of pooled their resources together, and that's how Project O was formed. So we have member schools that basically pay into Project O to be able to utilize our research vessels and our educators and some of the resources that we have here.
And that's how it started, the funding started, and that's how it continues today?
Yeah, so that was back in 1972, so we've been going strong for over 50 years now. So we still have member schools. Some of them, including Groton, have been members for all 50 years. And that is one of our funding sources. We also go after competitive grants, both at the local, state, and federal level to help support our mission as well.
How many schools are part of the membership now?
We have about 20 schools that are members right now. And then we have other levels too. So sometimes we have students and schools that may just come spend 2.5 hours with us at Project O, and that might be their experience. But our member schools, we're usually seeing some of those students more than one time per year, which is really nice.
It's really exciting. It is a great resource to have. What types of programming is offered through Project O?
So probably our most popular program would be our research vessel program. So we take students on the water out into Long Island Sound for about 2.5 hours. We spend time studying the biotic and abiotic components of the estuary. And so that's probably our most popular and what students really look forward to. We also spend quite a bit of time along the shore. I was just at Bluff Point this morning doing a program there. So learning about the nearshore fish population, studying barrier beaches and salt marshes. So that's part of what we do. And then we have classroom spaces and lab spaces in our facility, and you'll often find us in the classroom and local schools as well. So lots of different types of programs.
When the kids have a field trip with you all here, what does a day look like for that?
So they might arrive in the morning. We'll get them prepped for the boat. We'll do a safety talk. Everybody puts on their life jackets. We come out and spend about 2.5 hours on the water. So we might set the otter trawl net to see what kind of organisms are living here. We might have some students working in the bow doing some water quality analysis to figure out the conditions that those animals were coming from. And then once we're done with the boat, they may spend the afternoon having lunch here and then working from our labs. So that would be a typical day.
And what about if you go to visit them in the classrooms?
So when we go to the classroom, oftentimes we're bringing live animals with us that we caught here in Long Island Sound. And we have lots of other programs that are aligned to NGSS, which are the National Science Standards. And we have a good working relationship with the teachers that we're going into their classroom, so we're trying to really meet and support their needs. And so the programs that we bring vary, but live animals is usually a popular choice.
Oh, I'm sure. What about your research that you do here?
We have a few ongoing research projects. One of them is a new one for us this year, and that's the Unified Water Study. So we went through the training earlier this spring, and we actually did our first set of sampling last week. And so that's a really wonderful program that encompasses both Connecticut and New York sites. And so the new sites that we're adding on this year are the Pequannock River and Mumford Cove. So those are two new sample sites where we'll be conducting water quality assessments.
Excellent. And before that, what types of research would you do?
One of the other research projects that we're involved with is the L-Trap, or the Lobster Trap Recovery and Assessment Program. So that's a consortium. It's Project Oceanology, it's Maritime Aquarium, and it's Save the Sound. And we are working on removing ghost gear that's been either lost or abandoned in Long Island Sound. And it's usually lobster gear is what we're looking for. So it's called ghost gear because it's a trap that maybe has its line was cut off, and so it remains at the bottom of Long Island Sound and it continues to fish. You could imagine if an animal got inside there and couldn't get out and it died, that would attract other animals to come in. It would act like the bait. And so what we're doing is we're partnering with local lobster fishermen, and we're heading out into the Sound and we're trying to grapple, like remove those pieces of ghost gear. I think we've completed out of Avery Point now about 5 trips so far, and we've been removing about 30 pots per trip, 30 ghost pots per trip.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how far out do you go with that?
We haven't had to go very far. All our work has been in the Thames River and right off of Avery Point here. So there's lots of rocky shorelines, which is great habitat for lobsters, and so we really haven't had to go far.
What about the future for Project O? What exciting things do you have in the future?
Well, we're going to continue with our citizen science. Again, for 50 years, we've had students helping us to collect water quality data and trawl data about what's happening here in the Sound. So we're going to continue with that work. Coming up for us, we have summer camps just right around the corner. So we start those camps at the end of June. We have 8 weeks of summer camp, both day camp and residential, where we have kids in our building overnight for the week. And then in July and August, we also have public cruises. So if you're in town or you're local and you want to get out on the water, that's a great way to do it. We have those trips, again, running through July and August that you can come out on the EnviroLab and set the trawl net with us.
That's amazing. Now, for the summer camps, how many kids do you usually see come through here every summer?
So our day camp capacity is 24 students per session, and then our overnight camp has 32 campers per session, and each of those we run for 8 weeks all summer long. So we see hundreds of kids coming through our doors.
Every summer, I know, and it fills up. It's a popular program.
Yes.
Callie, I heard recently you guys just did a rain barrel project. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so in March we held a rain barrel workshop, and we applied through River Network, and they actually partner with Coca-Cola. So our local Coca-Cola facility saved their syrup containers in big drums, and we were able to pick those up. I think we received about 30 or so of those barrels, and then through the grant funding they supplied us with kits that actually convert those barrels into rain barrels. And so we held a workshop here. We opened it up to some of the local schools that we work with. So we had folks from Grasso Tech, we had folks from Thames River Magnet School here, and then we had some community members participate as well. So we talked about the benefits of a rain barrel, and we actually converted the barrels while they were here with us to be out there this spring and working.
That is awesome. Where will the barrels be located?
So Thames River Magnet School has about 5 of them to support some of their gardens that they have outside on their school grounds. And then Grasso Tech also took a couple of those barrels, and then some are actually within the Bakers Cove watershed here as well with community members.
Perfect. That's so fun. Great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really enjoyed our conversation. Stay tuned. We're going to be talking about Unified Water Study with Save the Sound coming up next.
Hi, I'm Michelle. Welcome to Wat-er You Talking About. We're going to ask our friends today some questions about water. Remember to answer with the first thing that comes to mind. A person comes to your door, box in hand, wearing a long jacket, and says they are there about the MS4. What do they want to talk about?
Spies. I have no idea.
Not sure.
Probably the river.
The MS4 is one of the major ways the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection helps protect state waters. The program has many dimensions, but one is to help residents learn ways they can prevent pollution. Can you name 3 Connecticut rivers?
The Thames River, the Connecticut River, and the Manchester River.
Connecticut's 5 largest rivers are the Connecticut, Housatonic, Quinebaug, Farmington, and Quinnipiac. Connecticut is fortunate to be a water-rich state with more than 5,800 miles of rivers and streams. Okay, you might remember report cards of old and being graded on the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Long Island Sound actually gets a report card. What do you think Long Island Sound gets graded on?
Not a clue.
Cleanliness.
Judging the water as to whether or not it's pure, or whether or not there's algae, or other things.
The Long Island Sound report card is released every 2 years by Save the Sound. Some items scored are water clarity, or how light penetrates the water, oxygen saturation, or the balance between oxygen in the air and water, and seaweed, or if there's too much. Thank you for joining us. We hope you had a splashing good time testing your knowledge of all things H2O.
Welcome back. We are here with Peter Linderoth from Save the Sound. Peter, thank you so much for joining us here today. Tell us a little bit about Save the Sound and your role within the organization.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. So Save the Sound, we've been in action for over 50 years now, protecting and restoring Long Island Sound, the waters certainly, but the lands and the air around the sound as well. We have all different types of people, a really diverse background of people on staff, lots of really unique skill sets that make our mission possible. We have environmental attorneys, we have land specialists that purely specialize in the preservation and conservation of lands around the sound, which of course helps protect the water. We have climate advocates. We have people up in Albany and Hartford pushing for stronger legislation to protect and restore Long Island Sound. We have ecological engineers that work with the natural landscape to help improve water quality in our environment. And then we also have environmental scientists like myself, and I work in the water quality program. I oversee our water quality monitoring, specifically for pathogen indicator bacteria. Those are things in the water. It's a host of things in the water that you don't want there if you're swimming, but also for environmental health. So how healthy is the water for the animals and wildlife that we love to see in the sound? And I'll occasionally get involved in public comments, working on water quality standards, public testimony, and the likes of work like that. And I love it. I've been on board for just a little bit under 10 years. And like I said, trained environmental scientist, but I grew up on and around the sound. So working with this crew of people, it's really a phenomenal team of people to protect and restore the sound is really near and dear to me.
That's great, almost a decade. Amazing. In our last segment with Callie Scheetz from Project Oceanology, we talked about the Unified Water Study. Can you tell me about what that is?
Yeah, I guess I'd be lying if I didn't say that was sort of my baby at Save the Sound. That was one of the projects that I helped develop. And it's specifically a water quality monitoring program that looks at the environmental health of the water. So Long Island Sound has this really rich biodiversity of animals and plants, right? And we love seeing that. And it does have a history. Back in the 80s, for example, it was really challenged in respect to water quality, and there were lots of fish kills. When you see thousands, tens of thousands of dead fish on the water, lobsters that were literally crawling out of the water trying to breathe. I mean, it was really a problematic time for Long Island Sound, one of many, unfortunately. But this Unified Water Study looks at monitoring the waters and assessing how healthy they are for animals. We don't want to go back to the 1980s. There's been a lot of work that's been done to restore Long Island Sound since. And water quality monitoring programs like the Unified Water Study help us establish baselines in some waterways and then also show as things get better or if they're getting worse. And then we can start to point at maybe some of the pollutants that might be causing the issue. I think I'll also mention with the Unified Water Study, while I said it's my baby, it was certainly a collaborative process. It's not just Save the Sound's program, it's not just Peter Linderoth's program by any means. We developed it with the EPA, New York and Connecticut officials, municipal leaders in various municipalities around the Sound, NGOs, groups that are already doing water quality monitoring. We all got together to develop this water quality monitoring program.
Now, you said, back we've seen some really tough times with the water quality. Was there other reasons why this Unified Water Study was created?
Yeah, and specifically what I was mentioning in the 1980s is the open waters of the Sound. While certainly the shallower water portions or the embayments around the margins of the Sound, so think the bays, harbors, inlets like the one behind me, were impacted. In the 1980s, the open waters of the Sound really declined, and that was due to excess nitrogen. But the bays and harbors, they don't have quite the same robust monitoring program, or they didn't before the Unified Water Study, which was in place to identify that issue. So for the open waters of the Sound, there's decades, and in the case of even towards New York City, there's 100 years of water quality monitoring in the open waters. The bays and harbors are a little more sporadic in what exists in terms of water quality data. And so the Unified Water Study helps fill and filled lots of gaps of water quality monitoring data to show how the environmental health conditions are in bays, harbors, and inlets. And so when we think about that, it was a really great opportunity to fill in those areas. But I do want to mention there were also quite a few groups that were out monitoring, already doing similar work to the Unified Water Study, environmental health, water quality monitoring. But comparing those data sets could be a challenge, or is a challenge, because you have groups that are conducting water quality work one way, and then another group's following a different set of procedures, maybe different instruments, different detection limits on those instruments for some of the parameters that we monitor. So piecing all those data together was a challenge. So having one Unified Water Study, one water quality monitoring program where numerous groups are participating, following the same procedures, following everything down to the time of day that they're going out, using the same equipment and supplies. We, Save the Sound, administers the Unified Water Study, and we're also a participating group doing water quality monitoring. But part of our administration is also setting those procedures up and then purchasing the equipment and supplies annually that's needed to do the work, taking in some of the larger instruments that need annual maintenance, taking care of them in the winter, and then reloaning them out to groups when the water quality monitoring season starts. And it really gives us this really wonderful comparable data set for the entire shoreline of Long Island Sound. So are we in all 100+ bays, harbors, and inlets of the Sound? No, and I think you might have a question later on about where we are, so I won't get too far ahead of myself. But we do have groups doing monitoring in the Eastern Sound, following the Connecticut and Westchester coastline into New York City, all the New York City inlets from Throgs Neck to Hell Gate, and then back along the north shore of Long Island all the way out to the North Fork.
So how many participants do you have?
Well, that's a good next question, isn't it? So we have 27 participants, and that includes Save the Sound. So there's 27 water quality monitoring groups that participate in this effort. Lots of traditional NGOs, non-government organizations like Save the Sound that are involved. We also have numerous municipalities, so think about townships, cities, that get involved with the monitoring as well. And we also have some private groups that are, for-profit enterprises that wanted to get involved in this type of work because their waters nearby are really important to them, and they're an important part of the community, and they got right behind this type of effort.
You had mentioned testing season. When does that season run, and how often do you collect the data?
So basically the UWS is the acronym, the Unified Water Study, or the UWS. The work that is necessary to make that program work is all year. It's 12 months out of the year. The actual on-the-water water quality monitoring happens between May and October. So it's a 6-month season. The groups are out essentially every other week collecting water quality data using a multi-parameter sonde, which is really just a fancy word for probe, that gets put in the water, and then readings for dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll, turbidity, which is water clarity, temperature and salinity are taken in the embayments and then reported back. And it's 6 months, like I said. And one of the things that's unique about us that really gives us that comparable data set is, in waterways and sites like Mumford Cove behind us, it's a shallower water system. So we have whole communities of seaweed, we call them macroalgae or macrophytes, but really we're talking about seaweed mixed in with phytoplankton, which is an indicator, or chlorophyll, which is in phytoplankton, which is like our think of it as like small microalgae floating around in the water. And those primary producers in shallow water systems are functioning a bit differently than they would in open water. So it's really important that our groups, they respond to daylight and nighttime pretty significantly. So it's really important that all our groups are out within 3 hours of sunrise. So 6-month monitoring season, basically every other week. And when the groups are out doing their water quality monitoring, it's all occurring within 3 hours of sunrise.
Okay, so it's really controlled. Yep. What do you do with the data that's collected?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So the Unified Water Study data, I won't say first and foremost, but has a really big part in fueling the bay grades for our Long Island Sound report card. So if you haven't picked up a copy of our Long Island Sound report card, you have or you haven't?
I have seen.
Okay, very good. So we've had a few iterations come out. We just recently released one last fall. It grades the Long Island Sound waters. So it grades the environmental health of the open waters of the Sound using Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection data. They've been collecting really abundant, high quality data in the open Sound for years now. Interstate Environmental Commission data, and then New York City Department of Environmental Protection data. Those are for the open waters. And when we adopted the report card, we immediately said, we need a comparable data set. We as in Save the Sound and partners and stakeholders, not just us, just to be clear. We need empirical data to fill in the bays and harbors with bay grades. And that's really important because a lot of people, when we talk about and think about Long Island Sound, especially with community members, they're not often thinking about the absolute middle of the open Sound, right? They're talking about these bays, harbors, and shoreline sections. So the Unified Water Study directly fuels the bay grades, which show in a very layperson-friendly way how healthy the waters are. So it's a report card. It goes A through F, green through red, and there's explanations weaved in. So specialists definitely pick it up and look at it. We've had elected officials, senators use it for advocating for more funds to our Long Island Sound region, federal funds. But also lay people can pick it up and just say, wait a minute, my waterway is getting an F. I'm not happy about that. I'm going to talk to Save the Sound. I'm going to talk to elected officials. I'm going to see what I can do and what we can do collectively to improve the water quality in the local inlet or bay. Or in some cases, people get an A+. They love that, right? No one's going to argue about an A+, but they want to know, how can we preserve that? How can we keep it at an A+ and not let it backslide to something else?
So if somebody does get a poor grade on their report card, what could be some of the causes?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we get really frequently. So there could be numerous causes that go into a poor grade. Say it's a water clarity grade that's receiving an F or a D or a C. Oftentimes that's due to erosion and stormwater runoff from, say, precipitation events. So the municipality or the governing body might want to look into tightening up their stormwater restrictions, looking into areas where there might be big influxes of sediments and erosion from stormwater. But one of the main drivers of the poor grades in the Long Island Sound report card as a whole is nitrogen. So nitrogen is really critical for Long Island Sound. It needs nitrogen to survive. Nitrogen becomes a pollutant when it's in the Sound in excess. Just like nitrogen makes makes grass in our lawns grow and plants grow, it can cause large growths of seaweed and phytoplankton in the water. And While some phytoplankton and seaweed is necessary and really important for Long Island Sound, when there's too much, it's a really serious strain on the environment. It can lead to lower dissolved oxygen levels. Animals in the water need oxygen to breathe, just like us, right? So think about fish with their gills. When too much nitrogen comes in the water, we get these large algal blooms of seaweed and phytoplankton, and through a set of ecosystem processes, dissolved oxygen drops. And that's really detrimental to wildlife in the bays and harbors. So nitrogen comes from various sources, although we don't have to look very far than ourselves as the polluter. It comes from our toilets and our sinks and our showers. It comes from fertilizer applications. Stormwater runoff picks up a lot of nitrogen before it drops into the Sound. So if someone's unhappy with their grade, I'd encourage them to contact us, contact the municipality that they live in, and we can look at, through modeling, some of the different sources of nitrogen that may be coming into that bay and harbor, and we can also look into the percentages. So in some of the places in eastern Long Island Sound, eastern Connecticut, and eastern Long Island, there's a lot of, say, on-site sewage systems like septic tanks and cesspools. And sometimes that's a leading case of nitrogen. And if that is what the circumstances are, then we can advocate and push for nitrogen reduction from those sources, say replacing outdated septic systems with new innovative alternative technology. As you go west in Long Island Sound, impervious surfaces or roads and roofs and surfaces like that start to become more and more abundant, and there's a lot more stormwater that enters the Sound kind of as direct runoff. In those areas, we look at the models and see that stormwater is a place to cut back on. And now we can't control precipitation falling from the sky, but we can control how quick it makes its way to water bodies. So building green infrastructure projects like rain gardens, bioswales, et cetera, in those areas can go a long way towards protecting water quality and improving water quality grades.
That's great information. Thank you so much for all you do for our water and for being here with us today.
Thank you, I appreciate it. It's a beautiful day out.
If you want to learn more about the programming at Project Oceanology, go to oceanology.org. If you want to learn more about the report cards or the water quality, go to savethesound.org. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to tuning in to another episode of Clean Water Ways.
Save the Sound, a proud partner of this program, leads environmental action in your region by fighting climate change, saving endangered lands, protecting the Sound and its rivers, and working with nature to restore ecosystems.